suppose if we thought of our slurry like these bags of 9, 5, 32, and every 1,000 gallons is worth that, like we wouldn't be blasé when we put it out, and we wouldn't be putting out our compound in February or January, or in October, or we wouldn't be doing these things. We'd think long and hard about it because it's a valuable resource. We would think long and hard about when we put it and where we put it. So I suppose if one of my messages is to ask farmers to just think more about it and know the value of it.
It's great to be back with another Environment Edge podcast, and you're very welcome to the show. With good quality slurry being the equivalent of a bag of 9,532 compound fertilizer, how can we get the best out of this valuable resource?
Teagasc ASSAP advisor Hugh Rooney joins us to discuss autumn slurry management on farms.
I'm Cathal Summers.
And I'm Deirdre Glenn,
your Teagasc Sustainability Advisors. We're back for another Environment Edge podcast number 84, and here we go.
Hugh, you're very welcome to the show. So we're talking about all things slurry today. Can you tell us what the nutrient value of slurry is at the moment, and how can we plan to get the best out of our slurry?
Okay, the nutrient value of slurry at the minute, if you were to equate it to a bag of a compound, 1,000 gallons of cattle slurry is worth about €30, and it's the same as a bag of 9,532. So 20,000 gallons, the same as a ton of 9,532. How could we get the best value out of it? And where should we target it? Well, I suppose that all starts with soil analysis. That'll lead us to the fields that are lowest in P's and K's and lime, and they're the areas that we're going to target. So you'll get your soil analysis done with your Teagasc advisor or your local co-op, and then your advisor will do up a nutrient management plan for you. And I suppose the nutrient management plan shouldn't be just something that's thrown in the drawer. It should be a key tool in your agricultural day-to-day use. And I think too many of these are just drawn up for a scheme or something like that, and they're just thrown there, but not used. But it's too valuable a resource. Slurry is too valuable to just be, thrown out willy-nilly. And if we thought of our slurry like these bags of 9, 5, 32, and every 1,000 gallons is worth that, like we wouldn't be blasé when we put it out, and we wouldn't be putting out our compound in February or January, or in October, or we wouldn't be doing these things. We'd think long and hard about it because it's a valuable resource. We would think long and hard about when we put it and where we put it. So I suppose if one of my messages is to ask farmers to just think more about it and know the value of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose we use the nutrient management planning tool that was produced by Teagasc, and it's a fantastic facility. You've got your maps, you've got your analysis, you've got your tank sizes, you've got your animal numbers. There's a huge myriad of information that goes into that nutrient management plan. And I suppose another message that we could send out to farmers as well is that once the analysis is done, I suppose we were talking to Stuart Childs on the last podcast, and soil fertility isn't where it's supposed to be at the moment nationally. So once you've got your analysis, you should really target your slurry on your lower fertility fields to start off with really first, shouldn't you, Hugh?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, Hugh, I love the way you describe 1,000 gallons of slurry as a bag of compound, the 9,532. That makes complete sense because it's a really good nutrient. But say, for example, a beef system versus a dairy system, if the slurry is a bit more dilute, will that change figures a slight bit, or will it kind of stay the same?
They will vary. I suppose the figure I was given there was, like a typical cattle slurry, maybe 6%, dry matter. If it's more watery, yeah, it will water down the nutrients. But then a lot of farmers would say that if it's watery slurry, it gets into the ground quicker. It'll probably get working quicker. It's not sitting on top of the ground as long. There is labs out there that will analyze the slurry for you. So if you think of maybe a thick cattle slurry where you're feeding a lot of concentrates to maybe fattening, animals, it's going to be, nutrient rich and nutrient dense and slightly higher value. So, whereas if you have water coming off maybe dirty yards getting into your tank, and it's, a more watery down product. Yeah, it'll be have a less value of NP and K, but still valuable all the same. But I suppose the gold standard would be to get it tested, and then you know exactly what you're dealing with.
Yeah, Dr. Birchall did some work in the last couple of years as well on slurry, and the higher the dry matter the slurry, the higher the nutrient value. But also, if the slurry is coming off open tanks or open slurry tanks or open lagoons, you can have a reduction of up to 6 units, can't you, of nitrogen in your slurry
More
content.
watery, yeah.
Yeah, the waterier it is, the more dilute the nutrient value.
Yeah, I think you're right, Hugh. I like the idea of getting it analysed. You know exactly where you are at the start of the year, and you can plan your fertility around it. I know you can use a hydrometer as well for a rough estimate, but I think for me, I think the lab one will give you exactly what you have, NP and K. Just look, we have half the year, more than half the year over us now. We're into the first week of August now at this stage. You, I know there's a lot of slurry hopefully gone out at this stage, but what kind of advice would you be giving to farmers at this time of year with the remainder of their slurry?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, today is the 1st of August. It's like 22, 23 degrees out there at the minute. We had rain last week, so, you'd imagine it's quite growthy at the minute. So I'd be hoping, like you said, that tanks are more than half empty at this stage. So we'd be trying to maybe encourage farmers to get the remainder of their slurry out in August and early September, because I suppose a day's growth, we've pretty long days still in August. Like a day's growth now in August could be like a week's growth in late September. So we will use up a lot more nutrients on growthy long days like this than we will compared to, the darker days of, possibly the end of September. So try and get it out sooner rather than later. And that's why we have this close period. Growth will slow down. There's no doubt about it. The days will get shorter, and less nutrients will be used and utilized by the plant, and they'll be there, left on the ground for whatever may come. To get washed away or leached away. So try and get it out sooner rather than later if you could.
Are we in a soil moisture deficit yet, do you think?
Well, it's a weird year. At the moment, we'd say we're not too bad. But do you remember about a month ago or a month and a half ago, we were, there's some parts of the country up over 60. And, that was not so much down to the lack of rain, but that northerly wind that we had there the whole summer, it was drying the place out mad. But hopefully we'll be okay. I'd say currently we're all right anyway.
I suppose another message we could send out is if it's extremely dry, if it's below 60 mils on dry ground, and no growth, there should be no spreading, really, should there?
No, that's right. Yeah, we had a strange kind of a year up here in the northeast. We'd never got a huge big burst of growth. We didn't really get the heat, and some nights were quite cold. And there was lack of rain for a number of weeks there as well. So there was a combination of things where growth was, I think, behind other years. So, but certainly in a drought, no, you don't want to spread slurry in a drought, in case it might cake on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Can you talk us through buffers, Hugh, and critical source areas? I suppose we work as ASSAP advisors on water quality, and I suppose we've a huge concentrated effort as a group of advisors going out nationally on critical source areas, looking at pollution impact potential maps. So what message would you send to farmers about buffer zones?
Yeah, well, I suppose I'll explain what a buffer zone is. A buffer zone is it's like a no spread zone between a water body and the field. So it's an area where you don't spread slurry or fertilizers or sprays. So, and the idea of it is that it's an area where it'll trap pollutants. It'll slow down water runoff coming off the field. It'll filter some of the the sediment and nutrients leaving the field, and act as a sediment trap really. And it's also a habitat. So they're very important, parts of it. They're nothing new. We've been talking about them for the last 20 odd years. But we have to sort of remind ourselves what they are and what the distance is. So for most watercourses, for most of the year, we're supposed to keep out 5 meters with our slurries, farmyard manures, any of those sort of manures. But for the 2 weeks at the start of the spreading season and the last 2 weeks of the spreading season, we doubled that buffer zone from 5 up to 10 meters. And the idea of that is that it just gives us that extra little bit of cushion that if there is a heavy rainfall event in that time, that there is a little bit more area where the nutrients can run into before it gets into the watercourse. So the message is just to try and adhere to these. And I'd often see it been out on farms, and it might be the contractor. If maybe they hadn't been told that there's a drain at the bottom of that field or the side of that field, and yeah, you can see slurry spread, quite close to these watercourses, and if heavy rain does come, inevitably you will get wash into the streams.
Yeah, and we should be looking out for all of the drains, really. Like some of the drains are mentioned on the OSI maps. So you have continuous blue lines and you've got broken blue lines, and they're the obvious watercourses maybe on the water bodies or on a farm. But we also have to give a huge amount of cognizance to dry drains and their connectivity to watercourses and rivers as well, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely, Deirdre. The dry drains, they're there for a reason. At some point in
Yeah.
the year, they will be carrying water, and drains are like the little byroads. A byroad will lead to a bigger road, and a bigger road will lead to a motorway. So they are all interconnected, and it all ends up in the one place eventually.
And we're all zoned as well as another message that we, I suppose, need to go out to farmers. But it's different dates and different zones. So I suppose get in contact with your advisors and be aware of when these are. It would be a very important message.
Yeah, we're up in Zone B here. We're in Louth and Meath, and our close period is the 1st of October to the 15th of January. And then next door is Dublin, and it's in a different zone.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we have to be careful and just know the zone you're in and the dates. But we probably shouldn't be just focusing on the dates. Get your slurry out early, and we'll probably come to it later on. But storage is another issue.
Yeah.
So
There's a question I get asked often when we get into this conversation when I'm out with farmers, and it's often somebody always asks, how much slurry is the right amount to spread per acre when you go out? And I'm interested to see what you think, Hugh. I always think it depends on the time of the year as well when you're getting into this kind of conversation. What do you say to farmers when you get asked that question?
yeah, I suppose we talk about the growthy periods. A growthy period will probably utilize and use up a bit more slurry, but a rule of thumb would be like maybe 2,500 gallons, at a time, not to go much heavier than that, or if it goes much heavier than that, it's kind of there, lying on the ground for a bit longer. It's not going to get mopped up as quick by the grass. It could be susceptible to a bit of runoff or a bit of leaching. So, rule of thumb would be 2,000 to 2,500 gallons.
And can you remind us of the kind of rules that are there as regards weather and that kind of stuff as well to keep an eye on?
Yeah, the obvious things. I suppose this time of the year, it's not going to be frost or snow, but it could be a heavy rainfall event. So just check the usual websites or apps for your weather. If it's given a deluge of rain tomorrow or within the next 48 hours, it doesn't make sense to spread slurry because it'll just end up in the drain. You won't get the value of it. So it goes back to my bags of 9,525. It's worth €30. Don't be wasting it. You wouldn't be spreading fertilizer on before a deluge of rain. So just be smart about it. Then as it gets into the shoulders of the season, you shouldn't spread in frosty ground or waterlogged soils or snow covered ground. But I suppose waterlogged soils is a more typical one for us. I know we've different methods of spreading slurry now. We've the umbilical system, and it can travel on ground that you think might be suitable for it. But if land is not fit to take a tractor and tanker, it's not really fit to take slurry, so it shouldn't be getting it by the umbilical system either. So just farmers need to be aware of that as well.
Just when you mentioned those dry drains and the rain, you nearly have to go to a museum now to see drizzle. We don't really get much drizzle anymore. It seems to be kind of mammoth rainstorms come the whole time.
Yeah, we're getting funny kind of weather now, and that seems to be the new norm. So we kind of have to be prepared for it and just get used to it. And just I guess again be smarter about when and where we spread.
I think another thing we should kind of point out as well as water advisors is the extreme vulnerability areas on farms. Like we have brilliant maps that we can use to just assess which are the most vulnerable areas on farms to nitrate leaching. So like there is a cap on the amount of, say, soiled water that you can put out there in a 42-day period. So it's 25,000 litres. And a lot of people don't actually know that. So that would be another thing to take into consideration, be very important for farmers to know.
There is great resources there now, especially on a website called catchments.ie. Anyone in the country can look these up, and it'll give you an idea of the soil type, what its issues may be, whether it's a phosphorus issue in your area, or maybe a nitrogen nitrogen issue in your area, or you can sort of set another layer. It's called your critical source areas, and it'll show areas that are more likely to flood in a field, and where are the flow paths, where are the most likely to enter drains. And they're good resources, and we would use them with farmers to sort of show them areas in the farm that might be more susceptible to some of these runoff events. So they're good tools to have, and they're there and they're free for anyone to use. Deirdre.
Yeah, I think they're brilliant. The farmers absolutely love them. Look, I think they're a little bit frightened by the amount of information that is available. There's nearly nowhere to hide with these maps, but it's it's a brilliant resource. Hugh, why is spreading slurry just before the close period an issue?
We've had the agricultural catchments program running in Ireland for, you can correct me, but I think it's maybe over 12 years now, 12, 13, 14 years. And they've been monitoring, I think, 6 catchments around the country. And every 20 minutes or half an hour, they take a water sample out of the river. And they've shown consistently that over half of the losses from agriculture happen in the closed period. So the closed period might only be like, your 16 or 18 weeks, but we're having half a year's losses in those 16 or 18 weeks. So that's sort of proven that, you might think it's mild weather and it should be fine to put out slurry, but typically the grass isn't growing in your cold winter months like November, December up to February. So it's not mopping up the nutrient. It's sitting in the ground there, and if we have one of these rainy, wet periods, it's getting washed away. So the findings from this agricultural catchments program is that, as I said, half of the losses are happening in those few weeks, at the end of the year. So that's probably proves, why we shouldn't be spreading close to those closed periods, so get it out in the growthy weather where the grass is growing, and we'll mop up and utilize all these valuable nutrients.
Mm-hmm. We had a bit of an incident now. It was after the closed period, but a group of farmers in Kilkenny had spread some slurry, and unpredicted rain came, and there was slopey ground, and some of it did end up, even with buffers and that, ended up in the river, and we had elevated phosphate and ammonia, and look at the fisheries and the scientists worked with the farmers within the area, but we had to, even with all the awareness campaigns and all of the messaging that we've been sending out to farmers, with the best will in the world, things happen,
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, but I take from what you were saying, you target that slurry to the height of the growing season, and by the sounds of what you're saying from this conversation is if the closing season is the 1st of October, going out the week and the 2 weeks before is, you're kind of wasting your time and your money and potential for pollution there as well, because the growth rates are going down at that stage of the year. So the likelihood the loss is high.
Yeah. So, like, as I said, the agricultural catchments program have proved that the losses are very high. So they're losses from everyone's fields. So if you're losing nutrients, you're really losing money. So it goes back to value your slurry more, think of it as bags of 9,532.
Is it just a kind of a routine that we've got into to wait until the last couple of weeks to empty the tanks? Just maybe a bad habit we've got into. Maybe last year was an exceptional year because it rained from August on, and actually people are under pressure getting out with slurry anyway. But is it just a better habit we need to get into then to organise ourselves better to get to target that slurry earlier?
Yeah, I think so. I think we have to be a little bit more organized, a little bit more proactive. And look, I do sympathize. It can be hard to get the contractor on the right day. It can be hard to line everything up so that it's perfect. But like even with the low emission spreader now, you can spread it on low covers of pasture ground as well, and especially if they're index ones and twos,
Yeah.
So you can get out in areas maybe where you hadn't thought of, but probably goes back to your soil analysis first. Try and target the fields, and just try and be proactive earlier in the year rather than leaving it till later in the year.
We're heading strong now for that winter. We're in autumn now, unfortunately, and still waiting on the summer to come. It's kind of here now, but I don't know how long it'll last. But the next thing, there's a lot of concrete traveling around the country at the moment with slurry storage and tanks and things at the minute. A common question I get asked when I'm out with farmers: how much slurry storage is enough? What advice do you have around that?
Okay, well, I suppose again it goes back to your zones. We're in the northeast there. We're supposed to have 18 weeks storage. I know it's 16 weeks down the country, and it's up to 22 weeks up in the northwest. So that's the starting point. But you could do calculations for a farmer. You could measure the tanks, and lo and behold, everything looks perfect. But when I go into a yard, usually the first thing I ask is, when do you have to spread slurry? And if you're told, well, I had to get a bit out at the end of January, you kind of know there's not enough slurry storage on this farm. On paper there might be enough, but in reality, something else is happening. There's obviously soil water getting in, or there's sort of source getting into the tanks, and they've been filled up prematurely. So I think farmers know themselves nearly better than anyone. Have they got enough slurry storage or not? But they might get through an inspection on paper, but I think we have to try and get away from, if you have to go out at the end of January, like your back's to the wall. And we've been having these sort of longer, wetter winters, and it's it could be March, April by the time the land dries up enough to take slurry. So
it becomes a management issue then, really, with nutrient.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
it becomes a headache, because if your tank is full, and down here, like in the middle of January, you can get out. But if like you said, Hugh, if your tank is getting full in the middle of January, or maybe the first week of January, your grass is not really going to grow until March anyway. So ideally, we'd like to push it out and get the best value. It goes back to your idea of the compound and the €30 a 1,000 gallons, and not to waste it.
Yeah.
I think we could stay here talking for a long time. There is a lot to talk about slurry, and I think you've given us some really good tips there today. And look, we know it's difficult. There's obstacles to get things right, but I suppose all we can do is strive to do as best we can. And the big message I got from you today is just to really value that slurry. If you get a chance, try and analyze it at the start of the year, to see what you're dealing with, and target it to those fields, the silage in particular, because that's the one where it's the most expensive grass in the farm, and then the next ones and twos, and just the right time, the right place, and the right rate. That's the message I'm getting loud and clear from you today. So just like to thanks a million for joining us on the show today, and keep up the good work.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
So there you have it. Tune in next time to hear more interesting chats and discussion.
Myself and Deirdre will be back in 2 weeks' time, but do give us a review on Apple and Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening to the Environment Edge podcast.